Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel, my guest earlier today, was an expert on overcoming binge eating. So I think what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes is going to be a nice follow-up to that one. Although what we're talking about is really intended to be a follow-up to our conversation last week about epigenetics.
Yes.
And specifically, you were just sharing with me just before we got started here, something you found through, I think it was ChatGPT, talking about different things that are beneficial that are tied to epigenetics.
Yes.
One of them being intermittent fasting. And I have to admit, I mean, I've had guests who've referred to it and so forth. I hadn't really explored it. You sounded like you had actually dived into it more than I had. So I was learning stuff and I was saying, wait a minute, we should be doing this on the show. So
yes,
here we go.
But so for example, I'll start with the concepts of, how epigenetics can affect your physical health. And that's sort of what we were talking about. So one of the things in my research, and we were talking about epigenetics and the things I've known, is it mentioned the things that could be helpful. And the normal suspects popped up, exercise, eating well, all the managing your stress, all those basic things would have a positive impact on the metabolic system in the body.
Makes sense.
Which makes sense. But let's say, for example, you have a family that has a history of type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And
okay.
that is a really common thing in the United States right now. And type 2 diabetes is not to be confused with type 1 diabetes, which usually happens at birth or at childhood, where either you get a virus and the pancreas is not producing any insulin at all, and it will never produce it. Those people are always insulin dependent diabetics, and that will never cure until they figure out how to cure it. So, but that's not right now on the horizon. Then type 2 diabetes is more of a lifestyle, at least in my opinion. This is not always a belief by every doctor, but it's more of a lifestyle thing. Eat a poor American diet, too many carbs, not enough exercise, and the insulin produced by the pancreas is not enough to manage that. So imagine if you eat 50 grams of carbs at lunch, the body would produce enough insulin to sort of digest that sugar, put it to where it needs to be, and then get rid of it. Well, imagine you or somebody eats 300 carbs at lunch. Then there's not enough insulin. The body's constantly producing insulin to try to mitigate that sugar in the blood. And so while it's doing that, it's straining the pancreas. And then eventually the pancreas just can't keep up. That's called insulin sensitivity. You have a decrease in insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
So going roundabout. So if you were to implement fasting or intermittent fasting, and I'll explain intermittent in a second versus regular fasting, that puts the body in an improved metabolic state. So meaning that during that time of fasting, there is no drain on the pancreas whatsoever. And that creates a whole different response in the body. When you're fasting, the body has to, a lot of changes has to take place for it to cope. It starts using glucose reserves. It starts burning fat. A lot of people who have brain fog, they intermittent fast or total fast, and it cures that. So there's a lot of things that take place. So it's really good for the gut as well to fast or intermittent fast, because the biome of the gut has a chance to sort of heal, and instead of that constant feeding of sugar. So fasting is exactly what it says. You do nothing for 24 hours but drink water. Some fasts say you can drink coffee with that, and black coffee probably would be true, but in truth, a real fast is nothing but water, and for 24 hours or whatever period of time. I've seen people fast for an entire week, which I find fascinating.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a little scary.
It is. And by the way, as we always do with disclaimers, you need to check with your doctor.
Yeah.
This is us discussing. Don't ever try that. This is
Absolutely.
stuff you make sure you talk to your doctor about that. But intermittent fasting is a little different spin on that. Most people have a hard time fasting. So intermittent fasting is where you have a window of time where you eat. And say, for example, you go to bed, you wake up, and you eat nothing at all until noon. And then you have about a 4 or 5 window. And again, there's various hours for this, but let's say you have a 5-hour window of eating. That doesn't mean you sit there for solid 5 hours and cram everything into your body possible. It means you eat what's a healthy diet that you would normally eat within a day, but you eat it in that 5-hour window.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, at 5 p.m., you will eat nothing else until noon the next day. That's a form of intermittent fasting. You're fasting for a period of time. It has similar effects to fasting, but a lot of people can do that much easier, obviously, than going 24 hours without food.
Sure.
So years ago, I was working at a treatment center when I was doing my first ever total fast, and I was drinking nothing but water. Also, as you know, Pellegrino does not sponsor our podcast, but I literally go through probably 10 cases of Pellegrino a month. So
wow.
I drink a lot of Pellegrino. And the reason I got into Pellegrino is the carbonated water gives you the illusion of being filled. So,
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it at least it felt like substance. At first it had, obviously it had no taste really, but I now love it. It's hard to drink regular water. So it was during that time that I would drink a lot of carbonated water. So when I was at work that day, of all days, some drug rep brought in 4 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts.
Okay.
On the day of my my total fast.
Of course he did. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that clearly. I did not partake, but it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. Is while I'm starving, I am sitting there looking at those incredibly delicious glazed Krispy Kreme donuts, which is the finest food made in the history of mankind, as we know. So there's nothing better. There's really nothing better. They're not good for you, but there is nothing more tasty. So, but the idea where we get to the epigenetic changes in this. So when you intermittent fast, you're allowing the body to do different things. So let's say you have a gene that has a propensity for type 2 diabetes and you've been eating a regular American diet, you likely would contract type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. However, intermittent fasting or fasting would be able to interrupt that and remember last week we talked about epigenetics being over genetics.
Right. This
is something that you could put over your genetics that would prevent that process from happening. That's the perfect example of epigenetics. It's that there's influences outside of you that you can do, behavior, environment, stuff like that. I grew up with a lot of mental illness and addiction. I experienced depression myself, anxiety, and a lot of my own personal addictions as well. So I have a propensity for mental illness, addiction, and all that stuff. It's there. However, I also discovered that I'm in charge of what I feed to my brain, who I'm sitting around, who I'm around, what I allow into my body, what I allow into my brain. All those things can override that. So even though my gene pool was exceptionally bad from looking at it from a mental illness standpoint, at least I feel I have good mental health now. Mm-hmm. And I don't deal with anxiety. I don't deal with depression. I still have my ADHD, but I don't view that as a negative. Mm-hmm. So I feel I've overrode that by the intake of what I don't watch the news. I'm a law of attraction guy. I posted today on Facebook. 30 years coming up in August of me writing 35 things I'm grateful for every morning.
Wow. Wow, what a streak.
I have never missed a day. And that includes when I'm in jail because I wrote them on toilet paper when I was in jail.
My goodness.
I also, the morning that my son died, after I found out that news, I still wrote 5 things I'm grateful for. When my mom died, I wrote 5 things I'm grateful for. I have never missed a day, no matter what is going on in my life.
And let me just interrupt for a second and ask, do you find 2 things to be true? One, these are things I found to be true. I want to know if they're true for you. Do you find, first of all, that if you even consider the idea of skipping it, that it just affects your chemistry?
It does. This is part of my belief system. So I have the life and the health and everything that I have, that I base it on that beginning practice of gratitude. I don't have anything without gratitude. I believe that. So whether anybody else believes that for me or not, if I skip it, that would be possibly my most, now, logistically, if I was in a coma for 2 days and I couldn't do it, I'd
Yeah.
probably give myself a pass there, even though I'd be pissed. But, nonetheless, I don't really think that skipping it, but I believe it to be true. And I'm coming up on a 30-year streak for doing that.
Which is just really remarkable and very admirable.
And so I, in my mind, I feel that is a necessary component, no different than me, lifting weights or exercising. The other stuff I do for mental health, eating well, all those things I find necessary. So it would affect me because I believe it would affect me, if that makes any sense. That's how I feel about that.
Right.
Another person that doesn't do it or does it occasionally certainly doesn't feel the same way about it, probably doesn't have that same belief system that I possess there.
Mm-hmm. And yet the fact that you have that track record also demonstrates not only that there's like, I think of it as like a physical dependency. Like it's a good kind of dependency. It's not like a drug addiction, but it's a dependency where if you were to, like I said, if you thought about not doing it, your body would react badly to that idea.
It would. And same thing with me in my exercise routine. I do my exercise. I can fit there's certain things I consider fundamental to my life and my health and my well-being. And those are two of them. And it's just necessary. I do a meditation every morning. Now, to be fair on the meditation, some mornings I might be running late, might not get that done. While I still enjoy it, I don't feel that is as necessary as the other things. So
the other ones, they have greater meaning for you and greater power for you as a result.
Yeah. 5 things I'm grateful for in the gym are really my top 2. I do other things as well, but being over genetics, anything that can sort of override genetics, you can see where that would come. So anything you can do for yourself when you're in an environment of negativity, and you imagine growing up as I did, with great mental illness and addiction and all that stuff that went on, family dysfunction. If I never would have made the change I had and stayed in that environment, I would have been just one more person in that generational curse of just going on. Now, it took a lot for me to break that cycle, and it literally almost killed me breaking it. But I was the one that was able to break it. It ended with me. And so that I set a new standard by the stuff that I did and my response to all that stuff. So I don't have that anymore in my mind. It doesn't, it's moved on. And I don't think I'm at a place that I would never allow that to happen again. And so that's the way I look at it. So being able to use environmental changes, nutritional changes, if you have again, propensity to be heavy, take away the benefits of fasting. If you have a propensity to be heavy and everybody in your family's always been heavy, and you're the one that says, I'm going to find the right eating mechanics that I like, the right balance of exercise and the stuff I need, and you defeat that, you're overriding your genetics.
Yes. Okay. So that ties into the second thing, because I said there were 2 questions. The first one had to do, like I said, with, what would happen if you tried to disrupt the habit. The second question is more of the epigenetic question, which is, what do you attribute to having practiced that particular, because that's a form of epigenetics. That's what you were basically stating. So doing that practice every day, what do you attribute to it? What are the results, in other words? Because whenever we're trying something out, we want to find out what the results is. Is it really helping me? Well, what are your results?
My result, basically this is where the law of attraction and gratitude come in for me. So my belief, strictly my belief, your belief as well, that when I am focused on being grateful for everything, instead of focusing on, I can focus on, my terrible childhood. I can focus on, having screwed up my life and going to jail, or focus on all the stuff that happened during my addiction. Those are all realities. That could be my main view of my life. Or I can focus on the abundance I have today, the people that I love, the kids that I've adopted, the kids that I've helped find foster homes for, the people that I help. So when I focus on gratitude, I then, and the vibrational level of gratitude is met from the universe, is my belief system. That's how that works. So the changes that takes place is I am filtering for gratitude. So the more grateful I am, all I can see is stuff that I'm grateful for. If something comes along that is negative, and I have a normal life, things are going to come along that are negative. I can override that much quicker, I believe, than the average person.
Ah, okay.
Because I have a base of gratitude for everything, because everything other than my son passing away, and I will never use that that's a separate category. I am sincerely grateful for every single thing that happened. The most bizarre, bad stuff, all that, because that was a necessary component to lead me to the person I am today. So
yeah.
gratitude is the most powerful force to exist for me. If I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful for, the abundance I now have. My biggest problem for most of my life was, financial issues, poor financial issues, until I figured out just how gratitude interfered with that lack mindset. And I've had to rank 100 problems, which I would have a hard time finding 100 problems. But if I had to rank some, money would still not appear on the list. It's not a problem.
Yeah. So the practical, tangible side to that particular epigenetic habit has a number of different components that you illustrated. The one that jumps out to me is that you said, and I don't remember your exact words, but you said that anytime something negative comes along, it's so much easier for you to just get past it.
Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, because that's the day-to-day experience for almost everybody.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I also throw in my, I have a very diverse belief where I get all my stuff from. This is where stoicism comes in really big for me. The stoic concept of, I have never had anything that happened that didn't lead me to something else. So like losing a job historically has been the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. You've had some interesting ones too.
Yeah. And so losing a job led me to everything better. So I've learned that even if something appears at that moment to not work out like I want, then I sit back and wait for, I just know it's going to work out better.
Yeah. Okay. So it's also the mindset piece. Then you're essentially saying that the habit of recording 5 things to be grateful for every day has affected your mindset so strongly that, wow, you're able to overcome anything, really.
Yeah, no matter, I really believe there's nothing that I have survived whatever life threw at me. In spite of whatever life threw at me, I didn't just survive, I sort of thrived.
Yeah, you turned into lemonade. Yeah.
Yeah, and so why would that be any different no matter what happens? It's that's how it works.
And that's true. That's the way it works. There are benefits and detriments to everything, including habits. One of the challenging things about habits is if you have a bad habit or a habit that doesn't serve you, then you got a problem because it's continuing to not serve you in a lot of different ways over and over again. But when you can turn things around and develop a habit that actually does serve you and stick to it, and maybe even have 2 or 3 of them, you mentioned 2 that are really big for you, the gym and the gratitude thing. I mean, that becomes a very potent combination. And the more that you add in that you do regularly, the more potent the whole thing becomes. But it's like a multiplying effect.
Yeah, well, it is. And, the gym, we talked about the gym, for example, when I found out and when everything was, I got into recovery and things, this is 1995. And now there was a whirlwind going on. I was facing felony charges and, I had nowhere to go. And this whole chain of events, I'm not going to tell everybody's story for the 100th time, but the factor
not that we ever get tired of it, by the way. I just wanted to point out.
I get tired of telling it, but
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, but what happened was I went. One of the great things that happened in my childhood is when I started lifting weights, and I realized how it made me feel. So I realized early in my recovery that I can't do this without, because antidepressants, and again, speaking for me, this is not anybody else, they do nothing for me. I took antidepressants. They didn't make me happy. They didn't make me sad. I'm not convinced they had anything in them for me. It didn't do anything. And,
it could have been a sugar pill as far as you knew.
Exactly. Now, again, that is just for me. But I did find that if I go, work hard in the gym, my mood was immediately elevated. I had a different perspective, and so I decided that no matter how bad things are, I'm going to continue to work out. And it was in the early period, things weren't going, I didn't just magically get in recovery and my life was great, but I instilled the workout principle of going to the gym every day or every other day, depending, back then I was still figuring out, but I understood that it was a necessary component. So the epigenetic effect for me, lifting weights and exercise, is over depression, anxiety, and addiction. So the epigenetic response to those things for me is, again, above genetics. My genetics is a propensity for me to have all those things. Epigenetics overrides that.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're redirecting back to the epigenetic topic that we raised last week, because I think the root of it that we described last week is that there's a belief, a rather widespread belief, that our genetics have tremendous control over our lives. And what the epigenetic concepts are essentially designed to say is, no, that's not true.
Right.
It's not true at all. And in fact, they have a lot less control than almost anybody thinks.
Yes. And again, going back to my ADHD, when, you're a 13-year-old kid, and especially way back in the old days when we barely had electricity, they had, they didn't know what ADHD was. So, I was smart. They knew I was smart, but I couldn't focus. And they just called me lazy and unmotivated. And that was and I bought into that. So while I made it out of high school and, all that relatively easily, but that was because the teachers loved me and knew how to con everybody.
Not a bad strategy, by the way.
What's that?
Not a bad strategy to be liked by the teachers. I'm just saying.
Actually, no, it's a better strategy than actually studying. Trust me, it's a lot more effective and a lot easier. But I got to, I had this narrative that I didn't like to learn, and or I wasn't able to learn, and there's a lot of reasons behind that.
Know you now. I mean, anybody who knows you now, I mean, you're like the man who has like 1,000 certifications.
So, but when I got in my 30s and I discovered, oh my God, it isn't that I don't love to learn. I don't like to learn stuff I don't care about.
Yeah.
You tell me if you want to discuss, the economics of ancient Egypt. I'm already sleepy from just saying that sentence. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But if you want to talk about neuroplasticity and quantum theory, I'm your man. We'll go do that all day. Because
just as long as they don't ask you to explain quantum mechanics, that's all.
No, we can't do that, because I will not go to sleep tonight if we start talking about that. So, but I went on to get a doctorate in metaphysics. I went on to, and again, I'm not saying it with arrogance, but I was almost close to an entirely perfect from start to finish grade. I missed one question, which was right, by the way. But
no, you told this story.
Yeah. And my entire, during everything, I missed one question, and they were wrong on the question. I proved it to them, but they refused to acknowledge it. To this day, they refuse to acknowledge it. So they would not let me appeal my 99.5. So I still deal with that, but all seriousness, I love to learn. I constantly am taking classes. I'm doing an AI class right now. I've had multiple neuroscience classes. I have, after I'm done with this AI class, there's a guy from Colorado, University of Colorado, that asked me to virtually audit his quantum theory class.
Oh, wow. So
I'm going to be able to sit through his class and hear that. And this is at University out in Colorado. So I'm excited about that. So I learned. But what I did was, when I discovered that, I can override that previous belief. So everybody has an entire list subconsciously of the things we can't do or we're not good at.
Yes.
And that list is there. And so a lot of people, and I'm not saying it's genetic, but in a similar way, it's stored almost as if it is genetic, because it's stored subconsciously. So being able to override that and change that is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself. You can literally look at it differently. And one of the things that I do, particularly with my younger student or my younger clients who are a lot of the foster care kids, we have one case we often cite, about this young man. They have such a negative belief system, an internal dialogue about, because their parents didn't want them, they got rid of them.
Right.
They're so negative about that, and then so they live up to the expectation of the screwed up kid. They act crazy, they do this stuff, and then most of them end up, unless they're adopted and their course change, most of them end up in jail, dying early. It's a really sad process.
Right.
But the ones that are given that opportunity to see it differently and realize that there's a whole different view. They're resilient. They're street smart. They see things different. Yeah, they probably don't have the traditional education, but they have the ability to learn. They have the ability to see things differently. They've been through so much more than other kids their age have. There's advantages within that's never been pointed out to them. All they heard is the negativity, what losers they were, what they're unwanted, how their behavior is that of bad kids, and they lived up to that. And once you interfere with that process, that belief system, again, you can override that. This is not really epigenetics, because that was never a DNA thing, but it's a sort of an epigenetic influence over the belief system. So you're being over the belief system as well.
You said something in there that cued an idea in my mind about it not really being genetics. And it occurred to me, there's a lot of popular information, popular knowledge, quote unquote, about genetics and the genetic influences on humans, their human behavior, human bodies, and so forth. And I don't know for sure. I've never investigated this, but my gut is telling me probably about 1% of it has some accuracy. And the other 99%, it's just somebody heard something along the way. Somebody had discovered that there was some gene that might be tied in some way to eyelashes. And so they decided to build a whole theory about how eyelashes grow because of this gene, and they can grow too far. And if they grow too fast, they'll grow into your head. And they just turn it into a thing that didn't actually exist except in the narrative. The narrative became its own living space, so to speak. And I'm kind of wondering if epigenetics is a way of countering that almost more than it is than countering genetics itself, because it's the beliefs about genetics that are really the problem here.
And that very well could be the case. It's the last week we mentioned somehow in passing what we're talking about is, right now the accepted theory of that evolution of man is science. It's the science. It is what it is. You're not allowed to, if you say anything other than that, you're crazy.
Or Christian.
Right? But no, and I'm not saying that it's not.
Yeah.
But the not be able to question it, because there is a little twist in evolution. There's a twist that there's some missing parts to evolution.
A few, yeah.
Yeah. So what is that? But you're not allowed to ask that, because you're just trying to confuse the thing. Now, I have several theories. One of my favorite theories is the sort of the mushrooms ate mushroom theory.
Okay.
So one theory that Neanderthals, not really apes, but Neanderthals, but pre-humans,
right,
discovered a bunch of mushrooms. They started eating psychedelic mushrooms, which drastically increased their neuroplasticity, created an entire prefrontal cortex that didn't exist and just grew. So mushrooms have an increase in neuroplasticity in the brain that's equivalent to a 7-year-old child, which is the most neuroplastic that a brain is. So there's a possibility that happened. That could have happened, which would have been evolution plus mushrooms. So,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
So there's theories, and I don't want to start a debate over evolution, because we could do that show on itself. But there's just belief systems out there that one of my this is funny because I saw this again today. But in my lifetime, Pluto was a planet. Then it's not a planet anymore.
Yeah.
Poor Pluto. It's done nothing but do what Pluto's supposed to do. And it's been demoted from being a planet.
Yeah.
Now, again, it doesn't really change anything, but I grew up believing there's 9 planets in the solar system. There's 8 planets according to today.
Yeah.
You know, but Pluto's still there. Not it's chugging away. It's heading around the sun. I don't think it's gone around once in my lifetime, but it's heading there.
It's doing its thing, that's for sure.
It's way out there. But
by the way, I'm with you on that one. I'm sorry, there are 9 planets. I don't care what science says.
Exactly. You know, I'm Team Pluto. I've always been. We need to protect Pluto at all costs.
Maybe we're going to get Pluto t-shirts. You know, we'll start a new Pluto movement.
Yeah, Pluto. But how many think, you know, like if you read how things have changed, a lot of times perceptions change, or this is the reality. Carol Dweck wrote a book called Growth Mindset.
Yeah.
And I don't know the book that's pissed more people off, and a book that's right and on point.
How about that, right?
Yeah, and the concept of her study is there's a term called growth mindset. Now, the opposite of growth mindset is fixed mindset, is what she says, because it's a softer term than victim mindset. But what she's saying is victim mindset versus growth mindset.
Yeah.
And so we know, you and I know, to me, the worst condition a human being can have is to have a victim mindset. It is the one,
especially when it dominates the whole mindset. Then
yes, I'm talking about that full blown.
Yeah.
I'm a victim.
Yeah.
Nothing is my fault. I was born with these things, and if you buy into that, then your life is your life. It will be reality. Then you have growth mindset people, and she was actually looking at foster care kids. She was fascinated why most of them went on the path that we talked about: jail, homelessness, dying early. However, there was a group of these kids, they far exceeded expectations. I mean, they become wild. So what was it about that group that was energized by their horrible childhoods, while the other group succumbed to them?
Yeah, why was it such a divergent set of results? Normally you have gray area. This wasn't gray area. No. This was, you know, severely one way or severely the other way.
Yeah, multi-millionaire, becoming a medical doctor, to go through the process. If you know, and I have a lot of experience with foster care, for a foster care kid to go through what they do and then go graduate medical school, is possibly the greatest achievement I've ever seen happen.
Yeah, sure.
That's not an understatement, because there are so many pitfalls in that. There's so many the poor early education, nobody really supporting you. Right. And then to have the wherewithal to not only get accepted into college, to perform in college, usually with no parental support because you're a foster care kid that's an adult now, then to get accepted into medical school, find a scholarship, find all these things that happen. And the ones that do are the best doctors in the world. I mean, they're amazing. And there's also entrepreneurs. There's people that, you know, refuse to give into that diet, you know, that dichotomy about this is what we are. I want to go grow beyond, and they did. And so growth mindset, there's people that are propelled by trauma and things to greater levels. And so in the loss of my son in 2014, when my son TJ passed away, one of the concepts that I used, and again, everybody grieves differently. This is my process. My grieving was pretty much like any parent would be for the first month or so. It was just total devastation. I didn't do anything for a month. And then, because of who my son is, I knew, for example, he would not in any way, he would not be happy that I've shut down for a month even. He would expect me to go harder, so to speak. So I developed the mindset that I'm not only just living for me, I got to live for teaching. I got to go do more. I got to go do more. Okay. And some people say, well, I've had people say, well, that's the wrong mindset. So you don't get to tell me that. That's what I did. And while I was successful before that, I exceeded any expectation. I went to another level.
Well, I can attest to that, because I knew you just before that happened, and I've seen from our interchanges, from our conversations here on the show, I've seen what's happened. It's been amazing.
So I work harder in the gym. I work harder at work. I just go at it more. And so I responded to my son's death by me going harder, which again, that's what, if those of my friends that know TJ, that would have been TJ's demand. He just accepted, he just kept going no matter what. Most resilient human I've ever met in my life. He would have been like, "What? Why are you even crying? What are you doing?" Just he would have been furious with me for even my week of
Right.
month of mourning at a time. But that's what he would have driven. So I can see where I took that and all the experience in my life and used it to become stronger. And I realized that it worked. I'm not a fragile, mentally ill, depressed, addicted person anymore. That's not me any longer. It's not. I'm far stronger than that now. I've recovered from, and I know this isn't a word many people hear often associated with addiction, but I've definitely recovered from my addiction. I'm not an addict anymore. I don't have depression and I don't have anxiety.
And that's fantastic. I mean, what an amazing story you have. Just to be able to say that and to say it with a straight face and have me believe you because I know it's true.
Yeah, you've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, firsthand. I've seen it.
Yeah.
A couple things that came out of what you were talking about there for me that I want to touch upon. One is, I mean, your story is truly amazing. I mean, you've had so much stuff that you've gone through. I know if I compare my own story to it, my story doesn't match up for all the drama and the tremendous leaps forward and so forth. So if I wanted to develop a little bit more of that victim mentality we were talking about before, I could start bemoaning, oh, well, geez, I'm not nearly as good as Joel is. My story is pretty weak. That's why I'm not really getting anywhere compared to him. He's doing so much better. You can do that kind of a measuring stick game, if you wish. Or you can think of it a little bit differently and say, it doesn't really matter how mine measures up to him. The question is, how does it measure up to me? Because that's the way I look at it.
Oh,
and to give you an example of that, I mean, that we've been talking quite a bit about AI lately, and I have an AI project I'm working on. Listeners know about that too. I've talked about it on the other shows as well. The thing that jumps out to me about the fact that I'm working on it so intently, and just to let you know, I'm working on it so intently right now that I literally had to buy a new computer because the computer I was working on just wasn't enough to do the work I needed to do. So I'm making an investment just to buy into this thing even more and buy into something that at the moment isn't even generating any income for me.
Yeah.
I'm just driven to do it. The reason I'm mentioning that is I believe there is a component to this whole topic, not only of epigenetics, but also the different growth paths that we're on that is directly tied to following passions. And there's a sort of an asterisk that goes along with it, which is you may not know what your passions are, and they may not be what you think they are, even when you think of them. This is a case of exactly that, because what I'm basically doing is programming, developing, not website, but code developing. And I did that for a number of years at a relatively low level, but I did do that for a number of years, and I got really sick of it, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I literally quit. I literally just stopped. Like, I don't like this. This is not fun. I'm not enjoying any of this. I don't really want to catch up on all the technologies. I really don't want to learn all the languages. I gave up on it. And now just by introducing AI into it, I'm fascinated by it again in a way that I didn't think was possible. Now, how did I get there? I got there by following my interests, by following my passions. My passions led me back to something that I thought I would never be passionate about. That's still blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't even know where it's going to go, to be honest. I have some ideas of where I think it's going to go, but I don't really know where it's going to go. All I know is the path so far, it's like, what the hell?
Well, but that to me is sort of life. The people that follow passions. I told you one of my favorite clients I worked with for so long, and I started meeting with this kid when he was like 14, and brilliant ADHD Asperger's kid, and he had a fascination with vacuum cleaners.
Yes.
And he did okay in school, but he somehow he studied vacuum cleaners. Mm-hmm. And when I say vacuum cleaners, he would ask you what vacuum cleaner you had. He would tell you the first year it was made, all the specs, how it. He knew every vacuum ever made from the beginning of vacuums. He knew it was annoying because he just wanted to talk about vacuum.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
had a picture of pictures of 2,000 pictures on his phone of vacuums.
Wow.
That was it. He had
Crazy.
no other interest but vacuums. And so I was working with him to develop other interests. And so one of our projects when he was 16 or 17, he for the first time ever, he was able to go out on a date.
Okay.
And so he came in the office. It was a Friday afternoon, and we were prepping for the date.
Okay.
And I'm going, under no circumstances do you talk vacuums. You cannot discuss vacuums with her. And he goes, okay, so what do I, so we came up with a list of questions. I said, just
Okay.
ask these questions to her. And I don't care if she says, what do you like to do? Do you like to play video games? We made up some things, but
Mhm.
you can never mention the word vacuum because you will not be able to stop talking about vacuums. So he's like, I'm ready to go, Joel. I'm ready to go. And so I was
love
nervous
this.
for it. So they went to this little Italian restaurant here in Richmond. And while they were there, he said it was going so well. And the table next to them, as they were leaving, they knocked over the bread. And so there's breadcrumbs all over the ground. And so the server brings out this old Hoover vacuum and starts vacuuming. And his date says, oh my gosh, I've never seen such an old vacuum. Well, there we go. He
That
got
was the
off to the
trigger.
races. He explained the vacuum. He pulls out his phone. He shows him the original vacuum, which was that one, and every model after that. And he explained to her, and he said, probably, he in retrospect, he said, I probably talked for 25 minutes, and obviously I couldn't stop, and I was showing her vacuums. And then when I finally took a break, she said, I think I need to go home.
Oh.
And I said, buddy, we almost made it. We almost made it. And you know, he did have a few more dates. He was able to do better. And then interesting, in college, he found a perfect young lady for him. They met, and she understands him, and he's now married, has a kid. Vacuums are not allowed to be discussed in the household.
Uh-huh.
But he is one of the head engineers for Dyson vacuums.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
So he's found it. He can talk about vacuums all day at work. They love him. He's fantastic. He's made great money. He's very successful, but he is not allowed to mention vacuums in the home.
In the
He said
home.
you're to never discuss vacuums with the children. so he,
So his early learning experience actually helped him later on in life.
well, and you're talking about passion, but passion drove him, and passion/obsession drove him.
Yeah.
And, you know, so within that, you know, you see that process, the obsessions and all the other stuff, but yet the passion is still there. So,
Right.
you know, if you allow everything to play through, there's people that developed a nuclear bomb. They did that with, I mean, to even understand the process, that great movie that was out, last year, year before, that was so good.
Right.
Oppenheimer, and it talked about the production of the bomb. And to understand what it took to do that, it was theoretical. It was just, maybe, let's keep our fingers crossed. I mean, one of the questions at that point was, if we light this, will everything ignite in the world and blow up at once? And they're like, maybe. Unlikely, but possibly. And so again, that led to that. I'm not saying nuclear bombs are the great thing that happened, but nuclear energy came from that. Which potentially could solve all of our energy problems. You know, there's a lot of benefits that happen. So passion is a driving force, I believe, can override genetics as well. One of the great stories is there's a gentleman from, let's call it Taiwan, or Thailand. Okay. And I think it might be, but it'll make sense here in a little while. So his daughter had a rare cancer that had no cure.
Oh, yes.
And so he kept desperately trying to cure his daughter's cancer. And it wasn't killing her, but it was going to kill her eventually. He had no money. They were very poor. And he decided to go to school to become a medical doctor to figure out a cure for his daughter's cancer. And he would sit in the library on a stool reading the books because he couldn't afford the medical books. And eventually got accepted through a lot of hard work, accepted and got a scholarship into a medical university or to med school, and eventually became a doctor, and eventually discovered the cure to cure his daughter.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he said, I was an average student. I had no desire with academics until his passion and motivation to save his daughter's life overrode, again, his perceived genetic disability as far as learning.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great indication right there of just how little we should trust the genetic side.
Yeah. And so the idea. Now, on the other side of that, there are certain things, no matter how hard I tried at any point in my life, I was never going to be an NBA player. As hard as I would want to believe, that's when genetics, hey, I can't epigenetic my way out of that, so
and I would say that's true for now.
For now. Yeah, but I'm open to everything. I also believe one day we're going to be able to grow limbs from our body.
I think we will.
We talked about that last week too.
Right.
But as it exists right now, likely by the time my life is wrapped up here, at least this version of that life, it's unlikely that I will be an NBA player. I'm going to go out on a limb and say between now and the next 50 years, I will not be an NBA player. Just saying.
That sounds like a fair bet to me. I think I don't think I bet against you on that one.
Yeah. Even though I'm so bad at gambling, if I bet on that, I probably would become one. So
that's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah. But within that, I try to speak to people's, not only their potential, but their wildest belief in their potential. I try to speak to that. I work on people believing that anything is absolutely possible. Not because I'm selling a pipe dream. I believe almost anything is possible. I really do. I think we're capable of anything that we really believe we can do.
I think you're right. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the only thing that holds us back is our belief.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, the limiting belief system in the brain is there to be protective, and it's not, because it does stop you from doing. I don't know how many people right now that are stuck in, even if they're good jobs they're not thriving at, they don't have a lot of free, whatever their thing, but they're stuck and they're afraid to move on from that because they believe there's nothing better than that.
Right. Which is sad on the one hand, but it's indicative. It's indicative of what happens when your beliefs become severely restrictive.
Absolutely.
Right.
And limiting beliefs, and we have a tendency as parents to download limiting beliefs in an attempt to protect them to our kids.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary thought right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, it's often meant to keep them from getting their hopes up, which I never understood that theory. That one's a little weird. I want their hopes way up. I tell my clients, look, if you want to, I could, Dr. Master, my mentor, who passed away in 2017, he said, you should have been a psychiatrist. You should have gone to school and be a psychiatrist. You have, you just have this natural instinct for psychiatry. You understand the brain better than most doctors I know. And I'm like, yeah, that would have been great, but I didn't want to go to school because of my belief in learning at the time when I could have got into medical school. And all that. So the limitations that existed there, I didn't believe that was a possibility for me.
Right.
Retrospect, I could have.
Sure.
I didn't, but I could have. But I didn't believe I could. So limiting beliefs are what stops 99% of people's progress. It's just a belief they can't. And one of my passions in working with kids, I'm fascinated by the childhood brain because they believe anything. And I don't mean in a naive way. They just say, well, that's not hard. Right. They have a way of breaking it down. I always said if I had a board of directors of a big company I was running, I'd have a 10-year-old on my board all times and ask them, how do we get this done? Because they will have an answer that's so simple.
And it will also be convention breaking.
No, yeah, because it's like, well, yeah, what do you mean? Well, our budget doesn't allow that. No, well, you want to do it. Here's what you got to do, and
Hmm.
they would see it from a non-limiting belief. So
Right.
so when you go say, when I have people, one of the I know a lady that I've shared this story before. Her son was sitting in my office listening to his iPad many years ago, and she didn't have a babysitter, and so we weren't talking about anything confidential, but I didn't know he was paying attention. So one of her things, she was a nurse and she did well. She was a single mom and she was a nurse, had a lot going on. Um, I was encouraging her to take advantage of her hospital's continuing education program, which would pay for her to go back to school to become a nurse practitioner,
Sure.
which is basically a doctor,
Yeah.
much higher rate of pay, and she can write prescriptions. And I really wanted to do it and eventually get into psychiatric medicine because she was so good at all that. So,
Hmm.
so I was saying, have you considered approaching your company about enrolling in school to do that? And she said, I'd have to. She listed three impediments
Hmm.
of why when I don't remember what the three things were, but something like, well, I have to get accepted, I have to do this, and I have to do that. Like three things she said. And before I could say anything, the kid takes his headphones, he goes, Mom, that's three things. So you're saying you can't do three things? and, and she said, well, honey, it's more complicated. She said, but didn't you just say it's three things? And she said, well, there's three big things, but it's still just three things. It's not 1,000 things.
Yeah.
That was a turning point. She went back to school. She's now a nurse practitioner. The kid's
Oh,
probably 20. Yeah. And wildly, so happy. But that was the moment when she realized her limiting beliefs were defeated by her 10-year-old son, because from his perspective, it's a no-brainer. Just, of course, you're going back to school. They're going to pay for it.
which is
She's like, well, I
fantastic.
wouldn't have as much time with you. And he goes, well, I mean, we'll figure it out. But I want you to be happy. I want you to do those things. It'll be a better life for us in the long run. He was, and her mom was alive. She watched the kid a lot. And, it was it was much easier than she thought it would be. And once she approached work, they did it. And then once she was approved, she got immediately accepted and started. And yeah, it's hard work. She had a lot of studying to do. It's basically learning how to be a medical doctor. Pretty intense stuff, but it's not too much more than nursing already taught her.
That's a very key point that you touched on there toward the end of that, where you said it was a lot easier than what you thought it was going to be,
Of course.
because that's what limiting beliefs are usually all about. They're usually about things that are a lot easier than we think they really are.
Yeah.
The limit is in the mind. It isn't in the reality of it.
No, it's all in the mind. The reality is the anything is possible. When Jeff Bezos started Amazon, he was selling some books online. That
Right.
was it. And I can remember Amazon a long time ago. And I'm like, well, he's going to deliver books. That's not exactly the most
Yeah.
exciting thing in the world, but it was unique. I mean, the idea that was a time where you can get any book in a couple of days, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Amazon said, then they started selling a few other things and school supply. And then all of a sudden, look at Amazon now.
Yeah. And I remember when Amazon, shortly after they'd come out, he'd become successful selling the books, and he went public, and essentially the stock took off because he announced, and I don't remember exactly how he announced it, but he announced that they were expanding beyond books.
Yeah.
And it took off to the point where the price became absurd for that time. It just seemed complete. And I didn't understand why people were doing it. It made no sense to me then, because I couldn't see where Amazon was going, like most people.
Well,
but
and
looking back, I say, well, damn, that would have been a great time to buy.
I'm not going to turn the camera around, but the 9 Amazon boxes I have to my left right now shows exactly what they've become, because
yes,
Amazon is at my house every single. It is, being as busy as I am, it is the coolest thing in the world. They drop it off at your house, best customer service. Their prices are generally the best or close to the best. I mean, it doesn't matter. This convenience is way there. Their AI program, their web services. Amazon is this literal conglomerate that most people they just see this one side of it. Amazon has so much going on,
Oh, it's
and
gigantic.
it started with a few books being sold, and
Right.
just giving. And I'm not trying to get into the debate whether Jeff Bezos is a great guy. People don't. I'm a big believer in abundance. I admire his success. I know he has whatever godly amount of money, ungodly amount of money he has, but I also know what he did to get it. I also know the struggles he went through. He could have, a lot of people tried, he did it.
Oh, yeah.
And, at the time when Amazon came out, Sears, Roebuck and Company and Walmart was still trying to catch up with Sears.
Mm-hmm.
And Walmart was coming close. They knew they were going to surpass Sears as the biggest retailer in America. And here's pathetic little Amazon at the time.
Right. And now,
I don't. Sears doesn't exist anymore. Walmart is still a powerhouse, but their main people they're trying to keep up with is Amazon.
And not succeeding, by the way.
No, they're getting the butt kicked. And Walmart serves a purpose, so I'm not anti them either. But it's just, the idea that this came from. So there's nothing that can't be achieved. There's nothing that we can't do. But the limiting beliefs or the concepts that go on in our brain that keep the action from being taken. Right now, there's some 12-year-old at home coding some crazy idea using AI that is going to create a company that's going to dwarf Microsoft and Amazon combined in 20 years.
I'm hoping that there's a 68-year-old who's doing the same thing.
I hope there is too. But and Jeff Bezos said that. He said, look, we're going to die someday because there's some kid doing it right now,
Yeah.
And that kid, So I look at this as we live, and despite what the news is telling you, all of this great stuff is going on. There's AI is fascinating to me. I'm grateful to be alive during this period of time. And because of my perspective, I'm fascinated by our world today. Things are in great shape for me, and most people don't share my view.
Well, they don't have to.
Yeah,
that's the other pieces. I think it's probably the final piece for the conversation. It doesn't really matter if anybody else believes that you can overcome your genetics.
Oh, well, you understand how much I care about what other people think more than most.
Right.
So,
right. But I want to point that out to listeners in general. It really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
No.
And
as much as you think I don't care about what other people think, I think less than that. So, and I don't meet people. I love you're my dear friend, and of course I care about what you say, but I don't mean it in the way of being negative. But
no, I know you don't.
Yeah. If you don't agree with me, I don't need to argue with you. I'm okay. When people say, I've had people all the time, well, the law of attraction doesn't work. I go, okay. Did for me, but it does for me, but it's okay. I'm not trying to sell you on it. If you want it, I'll tell you about it, but I'm not to convince you of it.
Yeah. That's a very key point right there. Yeah. Another key point that I think goes along with it is the question of rightness and wrongness versus liking and disliking.
Yes.
To me, that's the distinguishing factor right there. It doesn't really matter whether or not it's right or wrong, or what somebody else thinks is right or wrong. What matters is, do you like it or do you not like it?
Yeah, there are moments, there's days like, today I had a normal Monday, pretty busy, a couple weird things happened like most Mondays, had a good workout, finishing up the podcast. And I'm going to be working on some things. I got some stuff going on. I might watch a TV show. Very seldom. By the way, it's only 42 days till college football starts. So
that timed. All right.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. So my world is sort of, I'm my own little world, and my happiness is contained here, and I don't need other people. And that say that in not a negative way, of course. I mean it in my happiness is up to me. So what I view, or I might just go sit upstairs and say I have a long day and just hang out too. I can do any of those things, and none of it matters except what I want to do.
And there it is, right there.
Yep.
So, good discussion. Thanks so much. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.